Watch this.
The stage could be set for a showdown at the State House. On one side, a conservative estimate on tax cuts made by the governor. On the other, conservative lawmakers wanting to get a little looser with the purse strings. We check in to see which way the Budget Balancing Act is leaning. And we knew this was coming. A federal lawsuit against Idaho's abortion ban no longer exists. But does that mean it's fully enforceable now? Well, there's another contender in this legal fight that is hoping it continues. When it comes to Idaho's water, sometimes it is just a numbers game. And when one number doesn't match another, it doesn't take an act of Congress to change it. Just a bill by the Idaho legislature. 100 versus 450 plus. There's a big difference between the two, whether you're talking yards, weight, or millions of dollars. The 100 is what Governor Brad Little recommended in his State of the State address when it comes to how many millions of dollars he'd like to see in tax cuts. The 450 plus is what would be cut from the general fund revenue if the current tax relief bills all make it to the governor's desk, that is. That's, again, assuming he signs them, which is a big assumption since he already said if he thought Idaho could handle 450, he would have asked for 450. So did Governor Little shoot too low on tax rebates, or Idaho lawmakers trying to unbalance the budgets by compromising some programs? Joe Paris tried to get the answer.
Cutting taxes is usually a popular pitch. Governor Little began 2025 ready to do it again.
I'm proposing yet another round of tax relief for hardworking Idaho families. $100 million.
But at the intersection of Jefferson and Capitol, it takes two to tango, and lawmakers are well beyond the governor's tax cut quota. The $253 million income tax cut passed the House and Senate and is awaiting action from the governor. $100 million worth of property tax relief unanimously passed the House, and it's on its way to the Senate. The newly signed law, the Parental Choice Tax Credit, includes up to $50 million in tax relief, money that won't show up in the general fund, and another $50 million in relief that won't show up in the general fund is proposed in the form of an increased grocery tax credit, legislation that has already cleared the House. $453 million in proposals, with some other concepts still floating around the State House.
I'd love the signal that every year in Idaho, your tax burden is going to get less.
Last week, the governor making a point about lawmakers balancing tax cuts and items that need funding.
They know I'm not very happy about it. So if I would have thought we could do 450, I would have proposed 450.
In the tax cut conversation, there will always be the debate of how much is enough, how much is too much. Are we compromising important programs? Speaker of the House, Mike Moyle, he wonders if there really is such a thing as cutting too many taxes.
You can never cut too much taxes. Come on, give the money back.
Speaker Moyle sponsored the biggest income tax cut in state history. He doesn't see conflict with tax relief and budget funding.
We have enough money in this budget to take care of substantial tax relief and also fill the needs of the state. There's enough to do it all.
Those who disagree point to major line items, things like fire protection and water investments as areas that could suffer from too many cuts. Speaker Moyle says lawmakers are fully aware of what needs to get done.
The debate is whether they're ongoing or not. I don't like throwing the money at ongoing on things like that because it takes away the oversight of the legislature, you know. It goes into the base, you never look at it again.
On budgets, Moyle has his eyes pointed somewhere else.
My concern is that some of these budgets may not make it even though they're trimmed. We've got a couple budgets out there that are trimmed pretty substantially and still are having pushback from some of our members. So that's going to be interesting how that pans out, especially on the House side with those budgets. We still got a long way to go there.
There are also what-if questions about if federal budget cuts could impact Idaho, or if economic downturn suddenly changes the conversation.
And if we have some problems this year, we've got the mechanism to be able to come back and take care of that. But in the meantime, that money needs to be in the economy flowing. It needs to be in your pocket, taking care of, you know, this hyperinflation crap going on and all that. It needs to be back in the citizens' pocket.
So what does the Speaker of the House make of the concerns from Governor Little?
I think he's showing his concerns with the budgets, but I also think that he realizes that the state's better off with that money going back, and he's had influence on those bills a little bit too, so he knows what's going on.
And just today, JFAC, Idaho's budgeting committee, signed off on the projection revenue of $6.4 billion for the state. And Speaker Moyle says that's a good number, showing the economy is growing. He says Idaho should take advantage of that, give money back to the people, while also having room to fund everything that needs it. And Brian, I guess it'll be a time will tell situation. Those revenue projections are just that, projections.
Yeah.
If something comes up short, or maybe there's extra money, it could greatly change the conversation.
Representative Moyle, or Speaker Moyle, saying the governor knows what's in those bills, but he also told us he's not happy about what's in those bills. So we'll see as they kind of come to a head. It also brings to mind the point that he wants to send $200 million a year into Idaho's rainy day fund.
And that's something that I asked Speaker Moyle about, where he says that in his opinion, he doesn't think $200 or $100 million just sitting in a bank account, that helps Idahoans. He says if you have the opportunity to give it back from his perspective, we should give it back. But yes, that is something too that the governor singled out. We'll see if Idaho lawmakers agree. Something that we hear from lawmakers is that the executive and the legislative branch are equal branches of government.
And this could make this legislative session drag on just a little bit longer. We'll see. All right, thanks, Joe. All right, well, the fact that emergency services are not considered essential services in Idaho may still boggle a few minds. It's something they have tried to change in the State House, they just haven't. The reason, without that essential designation, the state isn't required to fund emergency services, which is why we've seen several bonds and bake sales over the years to pay for local EMS agencies. This is especially a problem in rural Idaho, as we've highlighted before. But even in those places, they are seeing growth. And because of that, they've had to rely on the volunteers, and they're not able to keep up with the demand for fire and ambulance calls. Well, this year, lawmakers aren't trying to necessarily deem EMS essential, but they are looking to make a switch in how they are overseen, like where EMS is stacked in the state budget, or I guess in the state hierarchy. So I guess the question is, does moving them under a different umbrella, does that mean that they get funds from the state?
Yeah, that's a good question. Short answer, no. It doesn't mean they get more state funds, but the switch could help them find some additional funding opportunities. Currently, the Emergency Services Bureau falls under the state's Department of Health and Welfare. But House Bill 206 would transfer oversight of EMS over to the Idaho Military Division. Senator Carl Bierke, who is one of the bill's sponsors, says the Military Division already coordinates emergency management at the state and local levels, so they believe bringing EMS under the same roof will lead to better coordination and guidance for EMS across the state.
You have your local control with support of a system that will help you do what you need to do at a local control level, which is hopefully generate future funding streams and get the conversation around how do we provide that level of security for everybody in the state, that when they dial 911, they get the resources they need. And it shouldn't matter if you're, up in Kootenai County or down here in Ada County, you should have kind of the same expectation.
The bill does deem EMS critical to the life, health, and safety of Idahoans, but it is not essential. So this does not guarantee any additional state funds will go to EMS in the future. But lawmakers say this move would help kind of guide that conversation with military experts that deal with this every day and hopefully help maybe give them some additional ideas of where they can find some additional funds.
Okay, I know we've talked about this before, another newscast and here on the 208. Like, for example, was it Nampa that was trying to pass a bond?
Canyon County.
Canyon County was trying to pass a bond to cover because they're growing so much out there. What do they think about this bill?
Yeah, I believe their bond has failed 3 times now. We talked to them when that was happening. I also circled back with them this month specifically about this bill, and they weren't necessarily ready to comment. They want to see if this makes it off the Senate floor, which is where it's heading to. But other places like McCall and Boise County do favor a shift.
All right, we'll see what happens. Thanks, Aspen. Well, the Department of Justice is no longer trying to stop Idaho from enforcing its near total abortion ban. The DOJ, now under the administration of President Donald Trump, filed a motion today to dismiss the lawsuit the agency filed more than 2 years ago. The case was made by the Biden administration. Idaho's Defense of Life Act violated the Federal Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, or EMTALA. Basically, it prevented Idaho doctors from performing an abortion when the mother was in immediate danger or in an emergency. Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador applauded this dismissal of what he called, quote, meddlesome litigation, saying there is, quote, no conflict between EMTALA and Idaho's Defense of Life Act, end quote. So is Idaho's near total abortion ban now still in effect? Well, for the time being, the short answer is yes, but it's still being decided by a federal judge because as it happens, the day the DOJ lawsuit was ended, there was a hearing scheduled on a separate abortion lawsuit in U.S. District Court. So this whole thing goes back to the spring of 2020 when Governor Little signed Senate Bill 1385 into law, which is known as Idaho's trigger law, which would criminalize abortion should the U.S. Supreme Court overturn Roe v. Wade, which they did in June of 2022 in the Dobbs decision, given the determination of abortion rights back to the state and triggering Idaho's law, which was supposed to go into effect at the end of August of that year. But at the beginning of August, the U.S. Attorney General, Merrick Garland, he announced they were going to fight that, and they filed the U.S. v. Idaho lawsuit. Enforcement was an on-again, off-again kind of situation for a while, with the injunction lifted in January of 2024 when the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear that case, which they did in April, and then they dismissed it in June, basically saying they took it on too soon, and then they reinstated the injunction. So it was off for like 6 months. While the case continues through the lower courts, though, it was reapplied. That happened in December of last year in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It went back to court, but they're no longer, well, under the obligation of coming up with a decision. But knowing what would happen under a Trump DOJ, St. Luke's Health System, the state's largest, filed their own lawsuit back in January to basically keep this legal fight going. Then yesterday, knowing the DOJ dismissal was coming, St. Luke's filed a temporary restraining order in the St. Luke's v. Labrador to make sure their doctors can still stabilize pregnant patients in emergency situations. They were hoping to avoid what happened during the 6 months the injunction was lifted, when they had to airlift pregnant patients to other states to get the medical care they needed, but they were not allowed to get in Idaho. Well, that restraining order, that was granted last night by District Judge Lynn Windmill, which means the injunction remains in place. However, today, both sides are back in front of Judge Windmill, with St. Luke's arguing the injunction should continue and Idaho's Attorney General arguing, well, it should be dismissed entirely. That hearing began at 3 o'clock this afternoon, so we don't know yet about a decision. But in short, one lawsuit to stop Idaho's abortion ban as it relates to EMTALA was dismissed, another continues, and so does the injunction against its enforcement, at least for now. The judge in the case of 4 murdered college students says the defense is being too secretive, while attorneys for the man accused of killing those students, well, they want the death penalty taken off the table because they say their client is autistic. Meanwhile, if that man is convicted and sentenced to death, well, it could be a firing squad that does the deed. Jude Binkley has details in today's 411.
The judge in the Moscow murders case is warning attorneys to stop being so secretive. In a court order on Monday, Ada County Judge Stephen Hippler told Brian Kohberger's defense attorneys and prosecutors to stop filing so many sealed documents. He said the attorneys should instead use redactions. This comes as a new motion was filed, including a sealed defense motion to take the death penalty off the table, citing an autism spectrum disorder. Kohberger is charged with 4 counts of murder in the 2022 deaths of 4 University of Idaho students. The trial is set for August. A bill to make the firing squad as the main method of execution for those on death row passed the full Senate this morning, 28-7, sending it to the governor's desk for his signature. It previously passed the House 58-11. The firing squad is currently Idaho's secondary method, but before it can go into effect, the state would need to build a firing squad facility at the Idaho Department of Corrections. Today, lawmakers voted to table House Bill 281, also known as the Bolter-Stahl Defend the Defenders Act. The bill memorializes 2 Idaho officers who were killed in the line of duty. Ada County Sheriff's Deputy Tobin Bolter, who was killed during a traffic stop in April 2024, and Boise police officer Mark Stahl, who was also killed in a traffic stop about 20 years ago. The bill aims to enhance penalties for people who commit assault, battery, or murder against an Idaho peace officer. A representative from Eagle read testimony for Stahl's widow, Cheryl.
My girls had to grow up without their daddy. Birthdays, Christmas, holidays, special events, their weddings, the births of their children. He has missed all these days and every day. I know that stricter sentences won't bring loved ones back. However, it may be able to give surviving families some peace, knowing that the guilty will have to pay for their actions.
While some lawmakers who voted to table the bill worry it would create classes among people.
There were 2 deaths in the last 6 years. Now, those were murders, 2 murders of our police officers. The same time, we had 200 murders of other people. What are we going to tell those other 200 people who had a loved one murdered? I'm sorry, they weren't a police officer, so they're going to go free.
An interesting sight on the streets of Caldwell this morning. About 1,500 sheep made their way through town today, and another 1,500 are expected to cross through on Saturday. They're headed from Melba to the home ranch in Gem County, where they'll be sheared. Then they'll head to Letha for the summer. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Jude Binkley.
All right, water, the lifeblood of Idaho for recreation and cultivation. And the rights to have it have been fought over for decades. It's nothing new, but what is new is getting state law to match what water users agreed to last fall. If you remember, back in May, the Idaho Department of Water Resources cut off water to junior or groundwater users. Apparently, they were taking too much out of the eastern Snake River Plain aquifer. Well, that curtailment order was meant to protect senior or surface water users from running out of water later in the season. Well, both sides finally came to a mitigated agreement in November, which requires groundwater districts to save a certain amount of water each year in a reservoir. But that amount, as Hunter Funk found out, doesn't match what's written in state code currently. And of course, to change that, well, it takes legislative action, right?
Yeah, exactly. You nailed it right there. House Bill 0334 looks to make it match. Simply put, co-sponsor of the bill, Representative Stephanie Mickelson, says groundwater users agreed back in November to conserve a minimum of 350,000 acre-feet of water per year. But the Idaho Water Board's plan, their water plan, states the minimum is 250,000 acre-feet annually. Mickelson says because time is of the essence and to avoid having to create a whole brand new plan, this legislation just makes a revision.
If you have to reopen the whole water plan, that could take 6 or 7 years to redevelop a new water plan. And we're in a situation where we need to push forward with having recharge as much as possible right now.
She says this keeps the agreement consistent, ensuring surface water users are not getting shorted and that the eastern Snake River Plain aquifer would be getting recharged.
And it's critical that we stabilize the eastern Snake River Plain aquifer because we need to make sure that that is a viable, vibrant aquifer for not only for today's generation, but for future generations down the road so that we continue to have the Idaho economy that's based upon ag. As groundwater users, we recognize fully that surface water users have senior rights, and we are trying to do everything we can to make sure that they have the water that they need, as well as that we have the water so that we can continue to farm, because we've built entire industries off of the eastern Snake River Plain aquifer, and we need to make sure that we continue to have that resource to work for everybody.
And this bill passed through committee and is now headed to the floor unanimously.
Yeah, well, unanimously. It seems like this one would be the least argued against bill that we'll probably see this session.
Right, because they all came to the agreement, so now it's just refining the code.
Yeah. Although we were just listening to an argument against something that against anti-Semitism. I mean, it's sillier things have been done. We'll wait and
Correct.
see. All right, thanks, Hunter.
Correct.
We've had a cloudy, cool, but pretty quiet weather day across southern Idaho. That is getting ready to change, though. As you look at the Twin Falls camera, it has already changed. Raindrops on the lens here looking out over the Perrine Bridge. Temperatures in the low 40s in Twin Falls. It is just rain for now, but that will also change overnight. We're sitting just below 50 with cloudy skies in Boise and in the mid-30s in the Central Mountains. It is a first alert weather day tomorrow, but it all starts tonight. Rain and snow coming our way. Highest impact, Magic Valley and far southern Idaho. Slick roads expected there if you're heading south or east of Boise over the next 24 hours. Driving conditions could get a bit dicey, and then blustery winds, highest impact there. Treasure Valley, we have a wind advisory that is in effect for the Treasure Valley and portions of northeast Oregon from noon to 8 o'clock tomorrow for potential wind gusts up to 45 miles per hour, kind of like Monday, back on repeat. And then we have a winter weather advisory in place for the eastern Magic Valley, most of southeast Idaho, and the Owyhee Mountains, where 6 to 10 inches of snow could accumulate above that 6,000-foot mark. So as we're talking about the rain and snow, here's the rain across Twin Falls area out to Burley. It is slowly inching northward, already turning to some snow as we reach towards the Camas Prairie and Fairfield. So this will all continue filling into the north overnight. Timeline for Twin Falls, it is rain now, but as temperatures drop overnight, it will turn to some snow. High temperatures tomorrow, only in the mid-30s for Twin. So a couple of inches of accumulation possible across the Magic Valley by late Thursday evening. Here in the Treasure Valley, if you're headed out for the evening, expect some raindrops by about 8 o'clock or so. It'll take a few more hours to reach our neck of the woods here in the Boise area. And rain really isn't the big headline tomorrow. I think rain and maybe even a wintry mix wraps up for the most part by tomorrow morning. Then we turn our attention to the wind in the afternoon. We're talking again 35 to 45 mile per hour wind gusts. Temperatures in Boise still up to 51. There's either expected highs tomorrow, so still mild as far as temperatures go. Not the case though in the Magic Valley. Look at highs for Jerome and Twin Falls, just in the mid-30s. So the system, again, the core of it down to our south, but all of this creeping far enough north to have an impact on our day tomorrow. So we'll get through our first alert weather day on Thursday. The system clears out for most of us by Thursday night into very early Friday. That will lead to a sunny but breezy wrap up to the work week. Temperatures continue to inch up through the weekend, back up near 60 by Sunday. We hold steady around 60 on Monday. More showers on Tuesday.
All right, we're going to get to some of your comments today, but just a reminder, you want to reach out to us, you can do it over the phone as well. 321-5614 is a place to leave a voicemail, or you can also email us at 208@ktvb.com. All right, here's what Dave in Boise County has to say. We won't fund public education adequately. We won't declare EMS as essential service and fund it, but we're okay with funding private schools with no accountability and cutting taxes to give politicians bragging material for re-election. Please, legislators, go home tomorrow. Shorten this session a little bit. Lawmakers are great illusionists. We wave a wand, everyone gets a tax cut, $137. Applause. In the next few months, you'll need to vote on bonds, levies, and overrides, and your $137 disappears. Ta-da, says Kelly in Caldwell. Doesn't Little have a line item veto to carve out some of the tax cuts, asked Rich in Boise? Yes, Idaho is one of 44 states that does have a line item veto when it comes to the budgets, although I can't remember the last time he used it. So we'll see. Why does Idaho need to build a firing squad facility? There's police training facilities around the state. There's also a lot of open range around Idaho. I mean, we're part of the West, but it's not the Wild West. We'll see you tomorrow.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.